Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Canadians with Disabilities and Their Allies. My name is Brent. I'm the host for the show. And today I have Cassandra Pollock joining me from the Politics of Disability and Equity. Hello, Cassandra.
Hello, Brent. How are you?
Oh, great. And thanks for coming on today and talking about how to file a human rights complaint.
Well, yeah, I said how to file a human rights complaint, but I really want to talk about, because I recently myself had an experience with filing a human rights complaint. And there's a whole history of, there was a whole 2 years of me facing discrimination based on duty to accommodate. And also because of the failure to do duty to accommodate, I was being denied another right, which is access to justice. But within that story, I think there's some important things for the disability community, and I think there's some important lessons to be learned about, why not to give up, because I think a lot of the barriers that I faced and obstacles I faced in that time were a lot of people would have given up or listened to what somebody had told them, including even some legal people, because people weren't necessarily even though I speak very clearly, people were often missing the point of what I was trying to convey to them. And this also led to further barriers to my access to justice, and based on my disabilities. And so I think I'm going to start off by just reading something from just to set this all up.
Sounds good.
From the Canadian the Canadian Human Rights Act. So we've got two things that prescribe our rights. We've got the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which I talk a lot about. But it's really the Canadian Human Rights Act, and then each province also has its own Human Rights Act. But it's the Canadian one that prescribes most of what the basis of discrimination are. But there's also some other things that are not related to my particular story I'm going to tell, but are things that come up a lot when I'm advocating for other people with disabilities, that they don't understand, that they also have some other rights go beyond what's in the Canadian Human Rights Act, but in individual provincial Human Rights Act actually have an extra prescription. And I hear a lot of things coming up about that, especially.
There's a lot that I'm hearing too out there. There's a lot of talk about, Brent, why don't you bring up the topic about the UNCRPD on your show? And then I said, when I have the opportunity, and maybe we can talk a little bit about that too.
We can try. I mean, we only got an hour. We might have to do a whole other show for that, because
we can do it from that.
I was actually trying to review some of it, and I'm like, oh no, that's just too much. Because there's a lot. I mean, different levels. So there's certain things that your provincial Human Rights Act and Human Rights Commission will take on, right? So if you have, depending on where you want to file your complaint, some things you file under provincial, and then other things, different things are filed under federal.
Mhm.
And so I'm not an expert in all of that. I can direct people where to go to your going to your individual provincial act, or going to the or commission, or you're going, even if you go to the federal commission, and they're like they will tell you, if we don't actually take on these complaints, but your provincial will take on that complaint. So they'll tell you, if you call up, if you call the wrong one, they'll tell you this is the wrong commission, call the federal or
Press,
call
press one for this, press two.
yeah. Well, they're different numbers, but yeah, so it's actually quite interesting. But let me try and see if I
Sure.
can pull up.
I wanted to know if we could start with our Canadian charter, because that's one thing that kind of frustrates me, because I have also tried to launch my own complaints, and I used to always kind of quote Section 15 of
Right.
the Canadian Charter, right? That's the classic one to
equality and rights, yeah,
equality rights. But then the thing that frustrates me is there's also that notwithstanding clause, and I forget which clause that is, which seems to undo everything that's been said in Section 15. So that's where it gets really murky for me. I just don't understand it.
Provinces, when making laws, there are certain circumstances where a province might want to, legislate a certain law. And if that law is contrary to the Human Rights Act, either provincially or federally, or contrary to the Charter of Rights, they can there's certain circumstances where they can use this notwithstanding clause. And I am not a lawyer, so I don't even understand all of that.
Yeah.
But I'm even trying, I was trying to find a concise thing. Falling grounds, I don't know. I was trying to find something concise under. It's a bigger act. The charter is a bigger act. But you're right. And it prescribes a lot of the things in the Human Rights Act. Section 15, which is, what is it? Rights and equality rights provision.
Equality rights,
yeah. Rights.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's of the Canadian Bill of Rights, as well as the Canadian Human Rights Act and similar provincial and territorial. The Charter Section 15 framework is for analysis described here is not directly applicable to these provisions, although there is often cross-referencing between Charter and human rights law jurisprudence. And then it gives some quotes. The following instruments, which are binding in Canada, include similar provisions. And then it gets into the different articles, because there's there's things like, being denied access to justice, which fall under the human or the Charter, but then on what basis are you described? That's the basis on which you're being discriminated against or denied justice, I think, falls under the Charter of Rights. And if there's any lawyers listening, please, type in the notes something and correct me, because I'm not a lawyer. But that's my basic understanding. So that's where there's kind of crossover. But I think it's easier because if I get, where is it? People, blah, 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 I gotta find it again. I had it and I switched over. Okay, Canadian Human Rights Act. Here we go. So, prescribed discrimination under the Human Rights Act, prohibited grounds of discrimination for all purposes of this act. The prohibited grounds of discrimination are race, national or ethnic origin, color, religion, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, marital status, family status, genetic characteristics, disability, and also conviction for an offense for which a pardon has been granted or in respect of which a record suspension has been ordered. And then where the grounds for discrimination is pregnancy or childbirth, the discrimination shall be deemed on the ground of sex, where the ground of discrimination of refusal of request to go on a genetic test or disclose or authorize the disclosure of the results of a genetic test, the discrimination shall be deemed to be on the grounds of genetic characteristic. And it gets into talking about multiple grounds, because sometimes you're being discriminated on multiple grounds all at once, and intersectionality is overly prevalent in the disability community. So often the more intersectionality a person has, the more discrimination they face in just accessing. So denial of goods, services. So discriminatory practice is denial of goods, service, facility, or accommodation. It is discriminatory practice in the provisions of goods, services, facilities, or accommodation customarily available to the general public to deny or deny access to any such goods, service, facility, or accommodation to any individual, or to differentiate adversely in relation to any individual on a prohibitive ground of discrimination. Denial of commercial premises or residential accommodation. It is a discriminatory practice in provision of commercial premises or residential accommodation to deny occupancy of such premises or accommodation to any individual, or to differentiate adversely in relation to any individual on a prohibited ground of discrimination. And it's the same with employment. Employment applications and advertisements. It's a discriminatory practice to use any circulation, any form of application for employment or in connection with employment or prospective employment to publish any advertisement or to make any written or oral inquiry that expresses or implies any limitation, specification, or preference based on a prohibited ground. So if you're an employer, you cannot put out an advertisement to hire that discriminates against somebody on one of those protected grounds. So it's not just the act of doing it, but advertising that you're going to basically not hire people under one of those protected grounds is also prohibited. And that's the same with tenancy law, which is more under the provincial human rights acts. Is something that comes up quite often. So there's a whole bunch of, but the basic is it doesn't matter whether you're an employer, it doesn't matter whether you're a service provider, like a business that is providing a service to the public, or if you're a government agency or part of our judicial system or anything like that. You cannot discriminate against or deny somebody any of those things based on one of those charter rights. And in our case, we want to talk about disability, of course, because we're all about disabilities here. And,
right.
And that's where I'll get into my story, is how I was at. I mean, I'm not a criminal. It wasn't a criminal act, but it was a traffic. It was traffic. In January 2021, I received 2 tickets in the mail. The courthouses were closed, so you couldn't do in-person things with the court at that time. And I have a disability that's not obvious, and because people see me doing things on the computer, they don't often understand the limitations or the pain or suffering it can cause me if I do too much of certain things, or a combination of things, such as typing a lot and even doing something I love a lot, which is graphic design. if I'm not sitting the right way, if I'm not doing, like, I sometimes have to take long breaks because I've done too much, because it causes me excruciating pain, because of both a neck injury and like I've got multi-level spinal cord compression, which affects, the dexterity in my hands, a lot of my upper limb mobility, which it's not obvious to look at me, but I'm feeling the pain.
Right.
That's caused by these things. And so I received these 2 tickets in the mail, and I think, okay, I go on, I understand there's this online court that they're doing. So I go on and I go to apply to, it says when you go on and look at your tickets on the provincial court website under the traffic desk, it says, if you want to fight these, click here. Well, the first thing that happened is I clicked there, and it kept taking me to the place where you had to pay. And because, when I'm searching things on the computer, I have a tendency to lean forward, and that actually puts pressure on my spinal cord. And that's also, so it's a combination of my vision,
Yes.
my disability with my vision, and my disability with my spinal cord compression causes
Yeah, just adds on. Yeah.
Right, yeah. And so I'll tend to lean in when I'm doing a lot of searching on the computer, and so I'm trying to navigate this website, and I'm also having to type to navigate and move the mouse around, and I'm just going in circles. And I spent, at least a week doing that. Finally, I found, okay, you got to go and fill out this form. Well, now I'm really like, I'm already exhausted and in pain from doing this circular search. And now I've got this form online that I have to fill out. And I'm like, oh my God, I cannot. I also have learning disabilities, and the learning disabilities on their own do not, one of them is, they call it a disorder of written expression. It's kind of inaccurate. It doesn't fully, because I can write very well and I can be very clear and very articulate in writing. But now that I have this thing that happens with the spinal cord compression and how it affects my dexterity when typing and looking at a computer screen, and I'm doing a combination of these things, it leads to a lot more pain, which also, pain reduces your cognitive function as well.
That's right.
So it becomes more difficult to write clearly and concisely in a way that other people can understand. And so I'm trying to find help. So I've called the traffic desk, and nobody's answering the phones. And yeah, like I couldn't get anybody on the phone. There was no place I could go in person because it was during COVID. And, I was just getting exhausted trying to find help. Just all I needed to do was fill out the form to fight these 2 tickets. I just needed somebody. I didn't need somebody to tell me what to say. I didn't need somebody to explain the procedure to me. I didn't need any of that. All I needed was somebody to transcribe my own words onto the form for me. And that's the only accommodation I needed. And when I'm explaining it to people, like they were sending me in circles. When I did get a hold of people, I did get a hold of this very nice lady who writes this letter to the department that I'm supposed to write this letter to, because at one point it's like, you have to write an email, which is the same issue as filling out the form. And so she fills out the email and she sends it off. Like, so she accommodates me, sends it off to this other department. And then they email me back saying, refusing to do a phone call with me and saying, you have to write a letter to this. And you have to go, and sends me back to the desk that accommodated me by writing the letter to them.
Oh my.
Wow.
And yeah, wow. I know. And so this goes on, and then I don't know at what point it was. At some point I got I think it was the following, like, I think it was just last fall, I get a letter. You go through periods of getting tired and giving up, and then periods where you're going hard trying to solve this issue. And I just, I don't have anybody in my life that can come over and help me with this stuff, like that can physically, like I don't have a lot of friends or family. I help most of the people I know in Alberta are people with disabilities, but they're also spread out. I mostly see them on Zoom. So, trying to find somebody that could do this for me was not an option. I tried. And then I get, so about a year later, I get this letter. And it says that I've been convicted in my absence. But now there's not just 2 tickets. So the 2 tickets I got in the mail, there's 3 more tickets.
Whoa.
And the other 3 I never got notification of in the mail. And I'm like, and they're saying you've got 15 days to answer, pay this or whatever before we take action or whatever. And I'm like, so it says there's the number on the form. So I call the number, and I'm calling the number, and I'm explaining to them, like, I haven't received these 3 in the mail. The other 2, I can't fill out these forms. I need somebody to physically help me just transcribe what I'm saying onto these forms. Like I don't need any legal advice. I don't need any of that. I know what the procedure is, but because of my disabilities, I can't do this. And they keep telling me, people keep sending, like, they keep passing the buck.
Right.
And passing me around, and nobody seems to understand. Like, even though I'm clearly saying I have a combination of physical and other disabilities that are preventing me, and I just need a transcription service. It's like they thought I was saying something else. I'm like, what do I don't understand.
You're like a dog. You're like a dog chasing its tail.
Well, yeah. And the number on the form, when I call it, so literally it says, if you need help, call this number. So I call the number, and you know what? Nobody answers the phone. You know what the message is on the number? If you need further help or anything, please email us to this email address.
Gosh.
I know.
Oh.
And so then, I'm having trouble. I called the department. I called the Ministry of Justice. I got a really nice nonpartisan public servant that tried to help me. She actually tried to get a hold of somebody at the traffic desk without using her office. She didn't tell them that this is where she was from. She's just trying to get a hold of somebody for me. It took her 5 days. And when she did, basically they told her exactly what everybody's been telling me, which is, this is the procedure for doing it. But nobody's offering me the accommodation I'm requesting. Like, they're completely ignoring that. And so, I mean, yeah. And so then it goes on. Then the next thing I know, I'll go into my CRA account to check on some of my benefits. And all of a sudden, there's this thing from traffic enforcement that they put on my CRA account saying that I owe them this $1,000. But I've never been given the opportunity to even go to court or fight the tickets, because nobody will just give me this simple accommodation. And so this went on for 2 years. And I even had people refer me. I mean, I have a friend that's a lawyer, and he told me to go to, Calgary Legal Guidance, and they're so backed up, it takes forever to get in. And it's like, well, try student legal. So I tried student legal, and I'm talking to this student, and and they're stuck on the fact that I haven't fought the ticket within the prescribed 30 days, that it's gone over the 30 days, because now and I'm like, no, you're missing the point. That's how it started. But I have been denied access to justice, and I have not been able to fight the ticket within the prescribed time because I'm being denied accommodation for my disability.
Yeah, you've been trying all the different angles, trying to get help to fight it.
She is so stuck on this 30 days and not hearing that, no, my issue is I'm being denied access to justice because of my disability. And I'm not being provided the accommodations, and so the Supreme Court of Canada says duty to accommodate, it is the point of to the point of their undue hardship. And there's several cases where they set a really high bar for that. And so to say 15 minutes out of somebody's time to transcribe my words onto a form is going to cause undue hardship, it wouldn't pass the smell test, right? And
Right.
so, and I was just frustrated. Nobody called me. She says, "Well, I have to talk to the supervising lawyer," and I'm like, "Well, can I talk to him, because I don't feel like you even understand what I'm saying here, and that you're going to accurately convey what I'm saying. Make sure you tell him that this is not about the traffic tickets per se, but the fact that I've been denied accommodation that would allow me to fight them in the first place within the prescribed time frame." And so a lot of people would have given up if they had talked to legal people and all these different people and had been told, no, it's not within the 30 days, or no, this. They would have given up.
Mhm.
But I knew that they had a duty to accommodate me. And that's why I was late. And the fact that they didn't understand that I was talking about duty to accommodation and thought I was just talking about the traffic tickets was a problem in itself. And a lot of people would have given up and said, "Oh no, they won't do it because, this and that." But I knew that the issue was not the 30 days. The issue was the accommodation. So I finally, after 2 years, I filed, I called up the Alberta Human Rights Commission to file a complaint against the courts. And even there, I call up. They used to answer the phone, and you used to get a nice person on the phone, and they would direct you to a human rights agent that would, basically assist you.
Right.
Well, when I phone up this time, nobody, because they've cut all these services, they've cut funding to all these programs. So I call up, there's a message on the Alberta Human Rights Commission phone that says, "We are not taking," now, yeah, this is just blows me. "We are not taking in-person or phone appointments at this time. If you want to file a complaint, please fill out this form." And somebody will get back to you. But I'm like,
Well,
and it tells you to
God.
leave a message, and somebody will get back to you in 24 to 48 hours. But I'm still
here in BC, I don't want to interrupt, but here in BC, everything is done through email, and they don't even get back to you that they've even received your email half the time. You just send something off to them by email. It has to be email, and then it just kind of
doesn't have to be.
It just kind of disappears into the ether, and then maybe they'll get back to you.
The thing is, it does not have to be by email. If you have a disability that prevents you or causes you undue stress and hardship in order to write that email, then they have to accommodate that. They can
let me put it this way. That's the only one they strongly advertise. They don't advertise any other way on their website. They only advertise through email.
I understand. So you see why people would give up, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
This is the reason why people would give up. But I knew, so when I heard this message, and it was like, the Alberta Human Rights Commission is now telling me I have to write, and this is the very thing I'm asking for accommodation and what I'm filing my human rights complaint over. Before they even called me back, I called the Canadian Human Rights Commission, which my situation does fall under provincial, not Canadian. But now I'm calling and I'm saying, look, I know that this does not fall under the Canadian Human Rights Commission, but here's the issue. I called the provincial one, and they don't even have anybody answering the phone anymore. And they have this message saying they're not taking in-person and phone appointments, and then I have to write an email to them. And that's the very thing I'm filing a human rights complaint over, is I can't fill out this online form or this thing. And so the Canadian Human Rights Commission says to me, okay, well, look, wait for the 24 to 48 hours for them to get back to you. If they get back to you and you still cannot get anywhere, then
Yeah.
you call us back.
Mhm.
Right?
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So now the Canadian Human Rights, well, if your provincial Human Rights Commission won't accommodate you, then call us back. Right? So,
It's like
so
the
now,
communication line between the right hand, the left hand.
so there's, but now there's the potential now that if they didn't accommodate me, I would be now filing a human rights complaint against the
The Human Rights-
provincial Human Rights
Human Rights.
Commission with the
Yeah.
federal Human Rights Commission,
Oh,
right? Like,
Mhm.
you see the irony? And
yeah.
I'm like, oh my God. Like, and so
Wow.
so they did get back to me within 24 hours actually. And the girl was very sweet, but she keeps talking to me about, well, you can go here and you can go there, and have you try, and she's offering me, and they were trying to get me to go to the disability advocate. The provincial disability advocate's office was created to advocate with the government to get better accommodations and accessibility for persons with disabilities in the community.
Mhm.
They were not established originally to provide accommodations for other levels of government that weren't willing to provide them. But that's what they were trying to get me to do. And I'm like, no, you have the requirement, not them. You don't have the requirement to send me somewhere else. You have the requirement. And she keeps going around in circle. And I said, look, I understand what you're trying to do here, but here's the thing. I already called when I heard your message saying that you're not taking in-person and phone appointments, and that I had to fill out a form. And that's the very thing I'm writing a complaint about. I said, when I heard that message, I was worried. And so I already called the Canadian Human Rights Commission, and they said, if I can't get any accommodation out of you, that I should call them back. Oh no. Oh no, that's not what I'm saying. I just wanted to make sure you knew about these other resources that were available. And I said, I actually advocate for other people with disabilities, and I'm extremely aware of all of these things, but that's not the issue. The issue is I need to file a human rights complaint against, the Department of Justice and the provincial courts, because they're not accommodating. They've denied me access to justice because they were unwilling or just did not understand that I needed this accommodation under duty to accommodate. And so then I had somebody call me back, and I filed and I got somebody, she transcribed the form for the Human Rights Commission. I finally got somebody to transcribe it, and they gave me, and she asked me specific things, because one of the things when you're talking about disability, so I know a lot of people that self-identify with certain disability, like, if you have an anxiety disorder, you have an anxiety. You don't need a doctor to tell you have an anxiety disorder. It's unmistakable if you have one. But if you're filing a human rights complaint based on accommodations because of your anxiety disorder, you do need to be able to prove that you have a medical reason, like a documented medical reason from a medical professional, that this is a true situation. So in my case, she asked me, she goes, well, like, can you get, if this goes, to the level of it ends up in a tribunal, will you be able to get a doctor's note, and you have medical documentation showing what your conditions are and blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, yeah, I have it. And I can get a letter of accommodation from my doctor, but nobody's even asked me for one.
Oh.
Right? Like, they were denying me, and they didn't even ask me. Like, it is almost as if people were assuming I was just trying to find a fancy way to get out of a ticket, but nobody asked me at any of these points, can you provide medical documentation? And I would have told them yes. And so I told her, yeah, if it comes to that, I can. And I said, I would have already had somebody asked me for that. And so we filed the human rights complaint 1 week later, 1 week to the day. I all of a sudden get a call from the provincial, from the senior judicial clerk, or no, it was the department. No, it was the Department of Justice, telling me that they were forwarding me to the chief judicial clerk for Calgary traffic.
Mm.
And they will help me out. And they, of course, passed it on to a senior judicial clerk, and she was a very nice lady. And basically, even though some of those tickets were like 2 years old and they're 30 days, I said no. I said the whole reason is that I tried within the prescribed amount of time. For 2 of the tickets, I tried, and the other 3 tickets I was never even given notice of. And when I did get notice, it was in the form of a demand letter. And when I tried to answer to the demand letter, I still faced the same barrier, because the phone number I called told me I had to email. And I said, I didn't need legal advice. I didn't need somebody to tell me what to say. I don't need any of that. I just need somebody to transcribe my words onto the form for me. And
Right.
so we went through each and every form and we transcribed it. And because, my car is also a mobility device, and without it, I had no way of getting to the courts. She even said, like, she transcribed everything for me. We spent 2 days doing it, because now there's not just 2 tickets, there were 5, and I had to explain each situation, and you have to fill out a separate form for each ticket. And I just
Wow.
said, yeah, so finally I said, yeah, we explained in the thing, the reason I never did this in the prescribed time is because I couldn't get the accommodation I needed. It was a failure. And basically the judicial clerks went into the judge for me, saying it was a fail. The reason that she didn't do it in the time was because of a failure on our part.
Well, and also what you said earlier too is important, because you said that nobody even asked you for proof of your disability, right? Nobody asked for a doctor's letter or anything. And so right there, that is like ableism, right? Because it's just like, it's
Well,
like,
I mean, and the thing is, Cassandra kept asking for help, and they brushed it off. Oh, phone here.
And they're not even asking you for any
Yeah.
proof. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, yeah,
And
passing the buck and passing me to all these different people and departments and exterior sources.
because they don't want to deal with it. They don't know how to deal with it.
But a lot of it came down to training, like the people that are on the front, like, so I was finally dealing with a senior judicial clerk, but there's clerks below her. And so those people that I was talking to that are answering the phones and they're to answer, they have not been properly trained on their responsibilities under duty to accommodate or how to deal with people with disabilities. I mean, in my case, it was a physical one, but I mean, but even with vision, like they do provide things for vision and hard of hearing, but even those tend to be, from what I've heard, inadequate. Like I don't have those issues, so I can only go by what other people tell me. But even a lot of times those are inadequate. Sometimes people need something a little bit beyond that. And that requires a human being to help them. And but the human beings need to be trained on these things and on their obligations.
They need to be educated to understand what the rights are and how to duly accommodate when somebody's
individual person. Not just if you're deaf or hard of, you're hard of hearing or low vision or whatever. Those are not the only grounds. Like there's
there's so many.
There's learning disabilities, there's physical disabilities, there's dexterity disabilities. There's so many.
In my case, Cassandra, I think I've shared with you before, like in my situation, right? Like I've filed 4 separate human rights complaints against the Ministry of Social Development here in BC 4 times over maybe about a 4 or 5 year period, and it's all about the clawbacks, right? And in my case, where it gets a little gray is, you know, and this what kind of pisses me off is
I think I know what you're going to say.
the response that I get is, well, it's okay to discriminate if the discrimination is equally applied. In other words, they say, well, the fact that we're clawing back income from you is okay because we also claw back income from the elderly and everybody else too. So it's not a discriminatory action. And
well,
you know, and that kind of pisses me off because I'm thinking to myself, well, you know, are you allowed to deny the truth that pension is not allowed to be a pension anymore? Because I mean, you know,
and I don't know of a province that does not claw back the Canadian pension plan benefits, and I agree with you, but there is something, and I was just reading it and I can't remember, but above, like, well, we're discriminating against all these classes equally so that it's not discrimination is an actual legal argument. But there's also something to do with benefits in a way that they can, and I'm trying to remember, let's see if I can find, I think I got it up here.
Well, I think it's because they say it's income of last resort, right? The whole thing is income of last resort. So that kind of gives them free reign to do whatever they want. But my point is that a pension is, by its own DNA, it's supposed to be a protected income source. Any pension is that, right? Any pension is that.
It's so funny. I was reading something about it. And I can't find it now. I don't have it up here, but that might be another, like, I'd be happy to look that up one day and we can get a whole that's a whole discussion we can get into just on that.
When you were saying that you wanted to launch a complaint against the Human Rights Tribunal, that's exactly the situation I'm in. Like, I want to launch a complaint against them because I feel like they're trying to hide the truth of the fact that a pension is supposed to be protected. And
in your case, my understanding now, there, you know, I'll tell you something. Sometimes when you're talking to a lawyer on these issues, because they're trying to, they know of the worst case scenarios, they tend to tell you a lot of that stuff, and it tends to be discouraging. But I think what would have to happen is, in this particular case, because there's actually a specific things within within our charter and within our Human Rights Act that actually there's decisions, and I think even some prescriptions, that they're saying there are cases when they can discriminate with some of these income sources. And I don't remember the exact wording on it, and I'd have to go reread it and look it up.
Well, I did speak to a lawyer, and I was basically told that yes, the government is allowed to do that. You know, so there's your answer right there. But my question always is, like, you know, if a pension is supposed to be protected income, why is all of a sudden the fact that I'm on disability assistance, why is that protected income allowed to be clawed back? It's supposed to be protected.
Well, it's income you earned and you paid into, and whereas the other one isn't. And
so that's why they can say, well, it's income of last resort, so we can just claw back whatever we want.
And I think there's another thing that kind of falls in there, and I could be wrong, is, again, if there's any lawyers listening, I hope they say something in the chat. But there's another issue of there could be an argument that says that, well, if we don't, now you're getting more than somebody that maybe didn't qualify for Canada pension. And so then which one of you is being discriminated against now, right? Because so there could be some nuances there, but there's another thing. Just because the other thing I've learned, just because a lawyer tells you it can't be done, doesn't mean that it can't be done. Sometimes it's a matter of finding the right lawyer. I mean, I'll give you an example. There's a case that actually has a lot of impact. There's a decision made in a case to do with prostitution laws that actually has broad reaching implications for lots of people, including people with disabilities, because there was a thing where this is something that had been fought many times and been brought to the prostitution laws have been brought to the Supreme Court many times. Okay. And so a lot of people will say, well, this has already been adjudicated and the decision's already made, give up. But they found a lawyer that saw an angle and read something and was like, no, actually, this has not been determined. And what it was is they said, the thing that they fought on and the determination that was made on the Supreme Court was that the laws actually, even though there was laws designed that were supposed to protect people in the sex trade from being, what's the word? Victimized or whatever, but they actually, the way they were written, they actually caused more harm and prevented them from also hiring or doing doing things that would keep them safe. So the law was said to be overreaching, and that basically that the law actually made their chosen profession more harmful. And because prostitution is legal in Canada, so prostitution in itself is legal, but the laws that were dictating how it could be done were actually causing more harm, right? Like they were preventing them from being able to hire security, hire a driver, hire, things like that, because then they were considered to be living off the avails. But rather than, that was to prevent exploitation by pimps and human traffickers. It was not, but what it also did was it prevented them from being able to hire security and drivers and administrative staff, or because they're running businesses, right? So anybody that they were paying out of the income that they were making could be considered to be living off the avails. So the court struck it down and said, no, this law is overreaching, and the law actually is, so you cannot make a law that causes somebody undue stress and harm.
Well, here's another thing too, is what I've noticed too with the government policies. Is now they'll say, well, if it's employment income, we won't, we won't claw that off unless you reach a certain threshold. So policies now, income tax or GST, you're allowed to keep it. It's a policy. We've changed that policy. You're now allowed to keep it, because once upon a time they would claw that off you. Okay.
Well, and my argument has always been to that is that so you pay with your employment income into EI and CPP.
All that kind of stuff. And now,
so it should be the application should be made the same as if it was employment income. It should have
and
that's the same requirements. Yeah. And I think there's an argument. You just got to find the right lawyer that's willing to fight that.
That's one of my big beefs too. What Brent just said there is if you're going to have legislation and you're going to have law that says, like here in BC, anybody on disability here in BC, you're allowed to make up to $15,000 of exempt income. They have $15,000 of exempt income. Okay, so they have this $15,000 that you're allowed to make extra. That's part of that's part of the legislation, or part of the law, or whatever you want to say.
Policy,
right? The policy, and then so then they say, well, we'll support you, fully support you on income assistance, to 100%, and you're allowed to make $15,000 extra. That's fine. But then they have this little wrench. They throw this little wrench in and say, well, we don't have to fully support you anymore at 100% if your spouse dies.
Right. So if you get $15,000 of CPP, we're gonna claw that off.
Yeah, it just seems so bizarre. Like to say, well, we'll grant you $15,000 of exempt income, but if your spouse dies, you're SOL.
Yeah.
You know.
Well,
and
that's been my argument for a thing like so there's been a policy. I think it's been changed slightly under the UCP, but the policy for AISH income was that under the NDP, and it's still within their policy manuals, is that if you were married to another if you were on AISH and you're married, or PDD, which is persons with developmental disabilities, and you are married to a person that is also either on AISH or PDD, then that income, but that's still discrimination because, and I always give the example. So I was making $65,000 a year before my car accident. That was the minimum. And if I had been married at the time, and my spouse was say my spouse was also making $65,000 a year, okay, I would not have qualified for AISH, but not only would we have lost $65,000 of income, okay, we would have lost $65,000 of income, but also the cost of my care, of just my survival, would have gone up by 20 to 40% of, say, whatever a livable income is. If a livable income is $40,000 a year, and the cost of my care because of my disabilities, you add on another 40%, that's another 65,000. So in theory, what would have happened is we would have lost $65,000 a year in income, but added $65,000 a year in income, or in expenses. And my spouse would still only have 65,000. So, right? And so how is that person? So you now, because I don't qualify because of their income, what happens is now it costs us to survive, $130,000 a year, but we have to do it on 65,000.
Yeah, they have the same kind of penalties for in BC here too.
Well, and in most provinces, and that's been my argument. Like I want to get that policy. I've been fighting to get that policy changed because of that very reason. Just because I have this, I should not be just restricted in who I marry or be under threat of losing the income I need to care for myself just because my spouse makes a certain amount, because they are also incurring the extra expense it now costs to take care of me on top of it. And
you see in BC, like we have, as you know, Cassandra, we have the BC NDP, and we have a party that just changed their name to the United Party.
An airline.
I thought maybe it's like United Way.
Oh, is that like, that's like the United Criminal Party of
I
made that joke earlier, Cassandra.
Well, Cassandra, they wanted people to phone in and ask what their thoughts were about the party changing their name. And so I called in and I said, well, I just thought maybe it was like United Way or something. And the guy was laughing. He says, they kind of when you call in, and we're going to be doing that eventually on our show. Is people call in.
What? Are you like where you are on the political spectrum? Sorry.
Well, yeah. I mean, he took the pre-calls, right? He says, your name, where you're calling from, what would you like to talk to Mike about? I said, well, I want to talk about the new name, not the new party. He goes, oh, okay. So I thought maybe it was like United Way or something. He's like, oh, he starts like, okay, you're on hold. You'll be up with Mike next. I came on, goes, Brent from Victoria, go ahead. So I said, Well, to me, it's the same party, right? Same policies. And every opportunity, Cassandra, I get, I mention people with disabilities. I have to hammer it in there. I start talking about the topic that they want, and I blend it right away into it because
Yeah,
I know they only give so much time on the radio, and that's it. So I blended. And I said, no, the party is still the same. I really hope they change their policy. I mean,
right.
maybe they need that opportunity to basically prove to citizens that we actually listening. We made mistakes. Maybe I don't know. I'm not promoting them because anyone watching this right now, I'm not promoting the new part or the new, not new party.
Well,
The new
but
name.
this
But
We
is
still want Dan Davies to
it's
come
not a
on,
new
though.
party though. It's
Well, yeah,
it's
and that's-
actually what my understanding is like. So the Liberal Party of BC actually, because when the Socreds and the PCs kind of went to the wayside,
right.
a lot of them jumped ship and went on to and became members of the provincial Liberal Party. My mom was actually giving me a history lesson in this. So and so so all these conservatives and Socreds jumped on and became a part of the provincial Liberal Party, which is supposed to be connected with the federal Liberal Party and have the same values, but now a lot of their values were very conservative,
Yeah,
or even farther right, and not conservative but libertarian-ish. And I think that was becoming a problem. I think that was, and I don't know, I wouldn't be surprised if the federal Liberal Party was like, yeah, we kind of had enough of you behind the scenes, maybe said, yeah, you're becoming too problematic associating, and maybe that's why they changed their name. I don't know, but that my understanding is that they changed the name.
They want to distance themselves from the federal. But the host the host said to me this morning was that you do know that the leader is a conservative. I said right, but I wanted to say more. And what I'm what I'm saying,
make it a conservative party, like say it's conservative, like don't.
It all comes down to just
united about what?
Yeah, I mean
we're coming up to the end of the top of the hour, I should say. We got 5 minutes left.
Okay, so I want to quickly. I wanted to cover. There was one thing I wanted to cover.
Okay.
It's not in the Canadian Human Rights Act, but I know for sure BC, Ontario, and Alberta have this. And there is a protected right. There is a protected. Where is it? Oh, it's what is it? Source of income. Under at least 3, possibly more of the provincial human rights acts, there is another protected thing, and it's source of income. Mm-hmm. So in Alberta, it prohibits the discrimination based on source of income, the intent of human rights legislation to protect people who historically have been disadvantaged because they experienced discrimination based on specific personal characteristics, such as race, color, gender, and disability. In keeping with this aim, only lawful income that commonly attracts a social stigma to its recipients is protected. So that and the source of income is protected under all areas. In here is statements, publication, notices, symbols, emblems, other representations that are published, goods, services, accommodation, or facilities that are available to the public, and tenancy, employment practices, trade unions, blah, blah, blah. In BC, it's only under tenancy that it's a protected. And in Ontario, it's also, I haven't been able to hear the whole Ontario thing, but both the Alberta and the BC cite some decisions in Ontario about the tenancy thing. So that is also, if you're being denied tenancy because you are on a disability income, or on old age security income, or GIS income, or any other, or income support, provincially, in most provinces, I believe you are definitely protected. A landlord cannot refuse you tenancy or an application based on this if
Wow.
your source of income comes from one of those things. So
So Cassandra, could I get you to come back on next Thursday, and we'll continue on that topic?
yeah, I would love to
Okay.
come on. Let's do
Okay.
it. Let's
Sure.
do this
Okay.
because there's
Good
so
deal.
much you couldn't fit it into an hour. And I just want
Oh
to say,
yeah.
I
It's
wanted
always
to tell
great.
my
I mean,
story because I wanted to make
we
the
could
point
we
that
could
lawyers,
we could actually make the segment a little bit longer actually next Thursday. If
yeah,
Neil, your thoughts, Bertie?
Oh, I mean, you
Birdie
guys
first.
are all my favorite people. We got all of my
Okay.
favorite people in the room here.
No,
So
no,
next
these are
Thursday sounds great if it
yeah,
works for Cassandra.
yeah. If I
absolutely.
yeah.
No, and I just in closing, I just
Yeah.
want to say that I think it's very important because I even had people with law degrees that were confused about what I was saying, and even when they did, they were kind of discouraging. But because I stuck to my guns and I finally pressed through and got that human rights complaint filed,
Yeah.
I was successful without ever having to go to court. Sometimes just the act of doing it. Now, a lawyer will tell you about all kinds of reasons why, if it goes beyond that, all the the ins and outs, and it can sound, but sometimes just the act of filing that complaint and bring it to their attention is enough to for them to correct their behavior and provide you that accommodation or to stop discriminating against you, right?
Oh, totally, totally. To conclude on our closing statements, so anyone watching right now, like I had mentioned a little while ago, I don't endorse the the new name of the party that's coming in here. What I will say though, okay, is doesn't matter which party it is, it's all about policies. Okay. So with people with disabilities, that policy, if the party wants to change their name, and I said this on the radio this morning, so I know there are some people that did hear it because I got some feedback already. So
Yeah.
and I'll say it again, just so it's on here, is that when the other party was in power for so many years, and I don't like to do like he said, she said, because my
16 years. 16 years in power.
one of my guests that's going to be coming on the show is actually from that party. And what I've learned too is that rather than he said, she said, like back and forth, and yeah, it's like the parties have to work together. And so with this party, United Party, okay, show that you actually care about people with disabilities, because I tell you, in that time frame when they were in government, nothing. So what I said on the radio this morning was that when they were in power, the person who is now the leader was finance minister, and went through the ministries and went through the Ministry of Social Development, or whatever it was called back then, social services, and said,
Yeah.
we want to find ways of getting money. Let's go and get the disabled reassessed.
Yep.
Yeah.
They did. That's what they've been
You're already
doing.
disabled, so why do you have to go through? And you know why I'm
the
saying
United Conservative Party, or the United Criminal Parties, I like to call them, in Alberta, has been doing the same thing, sending people and spending thousands of dollars.
Oh yeah. And the reason
to
why
reassess people for permanent and prolonged and progressive disability.
the reason why I say that, and why I advocate so hard, is that I was one of the ones that my doctor was beyond livid. He actually went down a lawsuit against the government. I won.
Right, I remember. Yeah.
I had two ladies showing up at my door, and they apologized. They were beyond, said, hey, could I give you a couple of dollars to go and buy a cup of coffee or something? No, I said, no. And she says, I insist. So fine. She gave me $2. She felt so bad. She felt so bad that the government did it, and it put me through stress, anxiety for 2 months.
Well, and that's another
no
thing
money.
we talk about next week. Is
We will.
There's a thing in law that under these discriminatory is they cannot, and this is under the charter, if they're doing something, if they have a policy or legislation that is causing you undue stress, that you wouldn't normally undertake, and it does not have to meet the bar of being like of killing you or increasing just the fact that it's causing you an undue amount of stress on its own.
Oh yeah, I mean, we'll definitely talk more on that next week. And
Killing me softly with
and
his
yeah,
song.
well,
Turn my
you know,
whole life.
the doctor had to. I mean, and I'll mention this. I'll continue this part on next week. But the doctor then had to put me through some other testing. Right, I had to go and get a physical done. And when I did, because of all the anxiety, stress, my cortisol level was right through the roof. My like the blood work and everything was right through the roof. Everything was like it was right off whack, and so I had to go and get some physio stuff done. And yeah, it was but yeah, we'll talk more about that next week. And but yeah, my closing statement on it is on this is Cassandra, you're always lovely having you on. I enjoy our awesome conversations.
Me too.
And letting people know about how to file a human rights complaint. It's a lengthy process in so many ways. Other times, in some ways it might be easy, but I haven't heard any easy way. So hearing your story, it's definitely
well, and we can go over that next week. Like we can maybe start off and I can go through like there's a descriptory process where they actually describe on the Canadian, and it's the same no matter which commission you're going to, but the Canadian Human Rights Commission gives you tells you step by step, and we can maybe go through the step by step and
we'll talk about definitely talk on that. We'll talk about what's going on, different provincial different regulations, what our observations, what we're seeing, what we're hearing out there. We may talk about the your view on the Canada Disability Benefit versus the Guaranteed Livable Basic Income. We'll maybe, I don't know, we'll see how the time goes on it. There's so many.
Livable income.
We can announce that Tom, the basic income guy, will be on Monday.
Monday, yeah. That's why I kind of blended that right in there.
So tune in for that. Yeah. Tune in for that.
That's why I blended that part right in there, because anyone wanted to, hear more about basic income. Tom, the Victoria basic income guy. Yes.
Make sure you talk to him, and if you have Jeff on in the future, both of them, talk to them about the fact that there's this thing called a living wage.
Yes.
And shouldn't a living income, a guaranteed income be a livable one, not based on what they call a living wage?
No,
a wage is an income.
Because the federal government's looking at this 19,000 threshold too.
Mm-hmm. Are they actually looking at it? Because Carla clearly said in one of the HUMA, she clearly said they were not looking at 19.
Oh, I hope not, because why I'm hearing this kind of rumbling around, because what's going on here? Hundreds of thousands.
This started before the HUMA committee meeting started, but because of it, in the HUMA committee meeting, when Carla was testifying, she was specifically asked about the 19,000, and she went, no. When we were talking about guaranteed income, we were just talking about the basis of it being a top up to existing benefits, because that's what it is. The guaranteed income supplement is a top up to existing benefits. Yeah. And she specifically said, no, I wasn't talking about the amount, which I believe they're going to raise, but they weren't talking about the amount. They were talking about the idea of that it's going to be a supplement to existing benefits, not the 19,000.
Right. Yeah, because that's because it was, and some provinces wouldn't.
This rumor started, and I even asked Mike Morris about this. I don't know if it was on your show, it was something else, but because basically it all started when they first said, we're going to make it a GIS style.
Right, that's where it started from. Yes, that's where that
and they asked this senator who hadn't even seen the bill yet, because he hadn't even gone to committee or third reading, in Parliament, so, or in the House of Commons.
Mhm.
And the reporters caught him outside and said, well, what do you think about this being modeled after the guaranteed income supplement? And the first words out of his mouth were, oh, well, the guaranteed income supplement. And he's kind of thinking like, well, that's about 19,000.
Right. That's where that magic word came
And
out.
once
number.
he said that, it spread like wildfire.
Yeah.
And that's why Carla was specifically asked that in when she testified at HUMA. And I
Oh,
would say,
okay.
go
That's
back
good to
and look at the HUMA.
That's good to know information because, yeah, that information, because I brought that topic up too on different guests that I've had on.
Well, and because she said that, we can hold her to that.
Oh, yeah, because I've asked Mike Maurice before on that. I've asked Bonita. I've had Bonita Azzarello on. And I remember Bonita said, Brent, where is this night? I remember that. Where is this night?
Where's it coming from?
From?
If there was no amounts. Yeah.
That's what we're,
it is coming from that senator being caught off guard.
Yep.
And blurting that out, and everybody ran with it. I got in a tip with an advocate or a director of an agency over it, and she cited that article, and I'm like, okay, first of all, he hasn't even seen the bill yet. It's not even made it to committee in the House of Commons, so he doesn't know what he's talking about. And then later on in the HUMA, when Carla was testifying in the HUMA committee, she was also pointedly asked, and she said, no, that's not what we're talking about.
It'll be interesting to see how that one going forward it will be. But I want to thank you so much, and for tuning in today. And Neil, you have any final comments too? Closing comments, and so next Thursday we'll figure out the times when we end the segment, and we'll get you back on.
Yeah,
sounds good.
Yeah, it was a good segment. I just wanted to again put my producer hat on and say that our next actually I should say we're going to have a open mic tomorrow.
That's right.
Open mic. We should say that first. Before Tom comes on Monday, there's going to be an open mic tomorrow. That's 2 to 4 p.m. Pacific.
Yeah.
So that's 5 p.m. Eastern. And then on the Monday, that's when we have Tom on to talk about.
Okay, good.
Income. So, yeah.
Yeah. And the time for Tom?
Time for Tom will be it's 1. Is it 1? Oh no, it's 2 p.m. 2 p.m.
Sometimes I have to look at that too, and I'm like, okay, what time is the guest coming on? So
you know what threw me off is because I know that for Cassandra it's 2 p.m. Alberta her time.
Yeah.
So then I had to kind of
go back an hour.
I get the 1 p.m. and 2 p.m. mixed up, so then I had to think, okay. But yeah, it's 2 p.m. as well for.
I remember the time where I had some basic income people coming on from the different time zone. Oh wow, that was really hard to really calculate the time on that one. And I had it was who was it, the one basic income guy? He was over. I was saying he was over in what country was that now? Just trying to recall here. But anyway,
it was Qatar. I believe you're talking about Qatar.
Qatar, it was on the tip of my tongue. I just couldn't get that, but wow, yeah. Of course, the time zone.
15 hours difference or something.
Yeah. It was. And over in we had from Qatar. Then of course we have.
We had China. We both woke up at like 6 a.m. in the morning.
I remember that early segment we had. Wow, we had morning coffee happening there. That was my good cactus cup there.
Yay.
That was a refill on that one, but no, it was good. I enjoy the different segments of the different time zones, and kind of puts things into perspective in different ways, and learning from people of what are they talking about. Different ideas, right? And come together as allies and as a disability community, and everyone has their own little knacks, right? And just have to kind of put it together and bring it forward. Some people have different ways of approaching that, and other ones, well, it's we're learning, right? We learn, and
Yours is the best way, Brent.
mine is the best way of, well, yeah, thank you.
I'm a little bit biased, but
Well,
Oh,
when I
me too.
when I say everyone has their own little bits of putting stuff in, right? It's all great ideas, but it's all about learning and listening and communicating and just saying, hey, like let's get this done. Let's get a guaranteed income, right? I mean, and we'll talk more about this on the next segment for sure. I think just giving people not just the crumbs, like here a little bit here a little bit there, that's not going to do anything. It's really not.
No, I mean that's been my issue the whole time. It's been like,
Yeah.
let's stop asking for crumbs. That's and I Jeff is such an amazing advocate, but that's where I get frustrated with him. It's like, no, the problem with his argument, that's what we've been doing all along, is been asking for less because we're afraid we won't get more. And that's resulted in, we have some responsibility in that's what's resulted in this, because we keep asking for crumbs, and then when we get a few less crumbs than we asked for, we're excited because we don't get anything, but we should ask for what we need. And if we get a little bit less, at least it's going to take us a lot farther than if we start off asking for crumbs, I think.
Right. Yeah. It's like a floor, then you kind of build up, right? And yeah.
But that's what we've been trying to do. That's what I'm saying. That's what's been unsuccessful, is trying to build on saying, oh, we'll take this little bit and build on it. But then it takes another 10, 20 years to get that extra.
Yeah. Well, it's like it's like my favorite part of the episode is I saved my big pot of spaghetti here. It's empty, right? We just got to throw all the ingredients in here, and rather than just boiling the water, right? Well, that's what I had to do. Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, thanks again, Cassandra, for coming on. It's a great pleasure, and look forward to next Thursday. So everyone, Cassandra will be rejoining me back on Thursday, and perhaps maybe
is it the same time?
Same time.
Same bat time. Same bat channel.
Sure.
Love the reference there, Neil.
Yeah, and
nobody else will get it. Nobody else will get it, but I got it.
And if we need to continue it on to the next one, then we will, right? Because that's just the show. I mean, the show goes on. So in the meantime,
this is a big conversation, because I think everything we've been doing in the disability community and everything we've been advocating for across Canada, whether it's the disability benefit or accessibility or whatever it is, it all comes down to human rights. So I think this is important.
Yeah, and what I find too is, like, when there's a segment and we run out of time on a segment, we continue on another segment. If that segment continues, we go on to another segment, right? So people will now follow along as what we're talking about. And in between time, how basic income guy coming on from Victoria. Open mic is tomorrow, which is Friday. That's the 14th. So join in on then for open mic. Have some great conversations, couple hours, sit back, have a cup of coffee, drink some H2O, on the rocks, some ice cubes. And
yeah, it's open to everybody, we should say. It's open to everybody. Okay. And
everybody.
The link is available in my community tab. So if anybody listening just wants to tune in and join on the Zoom chat, you just click on the link that's in the community tab on my YouTube channel.
And anyone else who's watching right now, if you're wondering, well, how come Brent doesn't have anyone from another political party coming on? Actually, there will be very soon. Just making the arrangements. I will be having Dan Davies, MLA, and I can't really say the Liberal Party because now it's actually the party changed names. So yeah, the United Party. He will be joining me. I don't know when, but very soon. I just want to give you a little update on that. And who Dan Davies is he's the opposition critic for the social development and poverty reduction in British Columbia. So he's the opposition critic. I'm going to be really looking forward to having Dan come on. I think that a lot of changes do need to happen right across the spectrum, not just in British Columbia, but across the country too. We need to change these policies. We need to stop the clawbacks. And we're going to be talking more about that with you, Cassandra, next week on that. But so much changes have to get done. But if we can mobilize across this country and work together and discussing a lot of these issues, come on open mic. We'll talk about this stuff. If you really want to come on my show, reach out to Neil. You can reach out to me, but I'd probably reach out to Neil, and we'll get you scheduled in. If you really want to reach out to Birdie, if you know what her handle is, you can reach out to her too, and she'll relate to Neil. Whoever you feel comfortable with reaching out to. And if you want to talk about your lived experience story, please come on in. You're more than welcome. I'd love to hear from you.
I was just going to drop a little bit of humor and say that even if Dan Davies changed his name, he would still be Dan Davies.
He'll still be Dan Davies because he's Dan Davies.
There you go.
Right. Hey, Dan. So if you're watching this, there's some humor in this. And Dan Davies, there is a double too, right?
Double. So we look forward to that.
Yeah,
Dan Davies will always be Dan Davies.
And Tim Hortons will always be the same kind of coffee because it is